Type in the chat a one. Give me a one if you can hear me. All right, bet. Cool. All right. So today, I just want to get straight into it. And per usual, I'm just gonna ask for participation. It may be just type a number in the chat. If you can kind of resonate with what I'm saying, please, once again, please, let's make this interactive. Let's not waste time. Let's just have fun. That is always my number one rule every single day. Let's make sure we're having fun at the end of the day. So today we're going to talk about lease structures. And before I start getting onto the whiteboard to kind of draw these things out, I want to kind of give a layout of what these lease structures essentially could look like, give names to them so that way I'm not just, talking out of thin air and things like that. So there are four different main lease structures when it comes to industrial properties. The one is just a simple, regular industrial lease structure in which you it's just like paying rent as if you're a tenant in an apartment building or in a house. You the only thing that the tenant does, or the business rather, because in industrial properties, these are businesses. Only thing that they do is they pay their bills, your utilities, and they pay rent. Once again, I'm going to draw this out, but I just want to kind of give a little bit of overview before we really get into the nitty gritty of everything. Then you have your second lease structure. Your other lease structure is called a modified gross lease structure, in which, yes, of course, they pay the rent, they pay utilities. This is where things become a little bit more negotiable, in which now, landlord, you, we're now talking to the tenant. Okay, what are you willing to pay? What am I willing to pay? How can we meet in the middle so that way this is a profitable win for the two of us? You get what you want, I get what I want. It's a win-win for both. Now we get the holy grail. Well, I'd say the yes, I call it the holy grail. This is what we call triple net leases. Triple net leases are when the tenant basically pays for almost everything. We're talking about the main area, depending on the property. Specifically, I look at what's called flex spaces, which I've talked about in a previous webinar. These are great when you have multiple tenants in one building at the same time. So we may have, let's just say, for instance, we may have a gym, we have a biopharmaceutical company, we have a landscaping company, all under one roof, and they share a common area that gets paid for. Repairs get paid for. The utilities get paid for, all by the tenant. And then, uh, yeah, that's basically it. And then the only thing that us as the landlords pay for is property taxes and insurance. So that's like the ideal situation for most industrial investors. I I when I talk to industrial investors, we strictly talk about, hey, is it triple net? Even the team that I look for some of these properties for, the first question is always, is it triple net? If it's a no, we don't want it. Okay. So that's, like I said, that's kind of like the holy grail. That is like you're not even getting that, with single family homes. But then we take the holy grail, the triple net lease, a step further, and we get into what is called absolute triple net. Oh, let me open that chat. I saw a question. Can ideally you include the insurance on the so we about to this is where we about to get into that, Precious. This is the holy grail of the holy grails. The absolute triple net. Absolute triple net is when the tenant pays for absolute, that's why it's called absolute, absolutely everything. All we do as investors and landlords is own the building, sit at home, and collect a check. They pay for maintenance, they pay for insurance, they pay for common area, they pay for everything that has to do with that property. We're even talking about the roof, HVAC, anything structurally, they pay for all of it. That is like, that's why I said it's the holy grail of the holy grail because, those are hard to come by. So when you find a triple net and you're saying, oh, all I got to do is pay property taxes and insurance, cool. Like that's the ideal situation. There's only two bills I have to pay. I don't have to pay for utilities. I don't have to pay for maintenance. I love it. So now I want to get on the whiteboard and kind of start drawing this out. There we go. The whiteboard. I am sharing it right now. Okay, my pen has a little bit of battery. Let me know. Let me see in the chat if y'all can see my screen. Give me a one if you could see the whiteboard. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. All right. So, as I said, we have three different lease structures, and I want to kind of go through this, starting from the lowest down and all the way going up to the Holy Grail. So, first off, we started with your standard lease. Your standard, oops, where's the eraser? Uh, the eraser. No, that's not gonna work. My bad. All right, so we got your standard lease. So this is like, once again, this is like your typical rental situation where the tenant is going to pay for only the utilities. So you got your electric, you have your gas, the water, everything they need, just like if you were renting your own property. The landlord, which is we're going to circle the actual building itself, you pay for everything else. Maintenance. You're paying taxes. You're paying insurance. So in any given situation, no matter what happens, even though this is a business, they're treated like regular tenants. And this is like, if so, the one of the main reasons why people get into the industrial space is because of the triple net lease, because they don't want to have the headache. This is why I specifically focus on these type of properties, because no, I don't want to have to necessarily manage the property. With industrial properties, it's more it's more of a set it and forget it in the ideal situation. So when you have to worry about maintenance, when you have to think about, okay, you know, when is the utility, when is what what uh what happens if the toilet gets clogged, or let's just say if we're looking at we own a warehouse, if the what is that, the spool on the chain for the garage door, what if that gets stuck? Those are things we don't really want to have to think about, because once again, that takes us away from doing the things that we do want to do. And at that point, you might as well go into another asset class like multifamily, where you can actually put where you can actually have to think about those things. You can increase your rent. You can increase the value of that one door with multifamily versus with these industrial properties. People get into this space. I don't know anybody who doesn't get into this space for a set it and forget it, for stability, for stable, predictable, and durable income. And as I talked about in a previous webinar, the big thing about industrial is the fact that inside of the lease, and this is why lease structure is super important, because you can have a situation where you pay for maintenance that is now eating at your cash flow. You're paying for the structural aspect of the building. So now you have all these expenses where it's no longer predictable because you may have to do maintenance. You may have to repair the roof. So that's why lease structure is super important when we're looking at this. Whoops. So now let's go over to your modified gross. Modified, oops, forgive me. I've been up since 3 o'clock today. Don't ask me why. But modified gross. Now, this is kind of like a typical situation. The standard is not necessarily your typical situation. Modified, you'll find more modified gross leases, modified gross structures within this space. And essentially, that's just, we draw the same picture again, where we have the tenant and we have the building, we own the building. And the tenant is specifically with the modified lease structure, the tenant grabs maintenance and repairs and the utilities. So that's one less thing that we have to focus on. And as the owner, we're now focusing on the actual building itself. We're focusing on taxes. Please feel free to ask questions. I have my eyes on the chat. We're paying for insurance. We're we're paying for mainly the building itself, and then the owner and the tenant, as I said earlier, they can negotiate. They can say, okay, well, based on my business's needs, we need this. So the owner can then say, okay, maybe it's best if you cover a portion of maintenance, or maybe if you're the repairs that you're doing or any modifications, they exceed a certain amount. We You pay for this, we pay for anything. Let's just say if it's a repair that's less than 2,500, the owner can cover that. Or if it's more than 2,500, as the tenant, you pay for that. I've seen leases where it is like that, and it makes sense why you do that. The fact that it is negotiable, the fact it gives a lot of wiggle room between, excuse me, the tenant and the owner, and what the expectation is. Because once again, we're in business with the business. Our tenant is the business. So some businesses require certain things, and you want to make sure you don't want to stop them from being able to run their business effectively, especially if they like the space and they need to make modifications. One thing that I did, actually, I'll use that in a different example. I do see that we have a question. in this instance, who covers the roof and HVAC. So with once again, with modified gross, strictly negotiable. That can be put into the lease. So out of all the four leases that we're talking about today, modified gross is the most flexible because the tenant and the landlord can come together and come to an agreement. And specifically for roof and HVAC, that could be maybe one may get covered, maybe the other may get covered. It could be dependent on what business is in there. So, for instance, if this is a business and let's just say like refrigeration and storage, temperature is very important. So here's a good example. This is an example I've talked about before, and I'm going to talk about when we get into triple net leases. With a flex property I looked at, I think last year, there was a biopharmaceutical company there, and in the back of their space, they had like 50 refrigerators. Okay, that's going to run up the bill. That can require a different level of HVAC system necessary for you to be able to store whatever you have to do, right? So in the modified gross lease structure, it can be negotiated that, okay, yeah, we're going to need you to cover the HVAC, or we're going to need you to cover a portion of any repairs on the HVAC system because of the type of business that you're running. Once again, modified gross, completely negotiable when it comes to certain, especially maintenance. The base rent, that's completely covered by the tenant. The certain repairs, that gets covered by the tenant. But this is super flexible. Like, it doesn't get any more flexible than modified gross. I do understand why most investors would not look for this unless they want to, unless they actually want to care for the property. But I don't know of too many people. Um, I don't know of too many people who are looking for modified gross leases. What if they do not? What if they do not gross what they stated in the contract and profit falls short? Performance is meeting agreement terms. Can landlord request their records? How does this affect the lease terms? So let me make sure I understand the question itself. So, what if they do not gross what they stated in the contract? So what if what if they're unable to pay for what they signed up to pay for? Is that correct? Is that what we're saying? Okay. So in the case that you don't pay, you're not able to cover what you pay for, that's also stated in the lease agreement. We're now saying, okay, so you now have an outstanding balance. Essentially, that's what happens, because the same thing is if you're a tenant and you're renting and the landlord says, okay, you go ahead and pay for it. I will I will reimburse you once you send me the receipt. I had a friend who went through this. He paid for it, they got it fixed. You send the receipt and then they get it back. And then they pay you back. So you now have an outstanding balance as the tenant because sales fell short. This is why things can get sticky. Though it's flexible, it could get sticky, but doing your homework on your tenant is very important. It's great. Like, this is a great asset class to really get into. But knowing who your tenant is, what the history is, like, you're going to do a check on your tenant, this on your business tenant in these properties, the same way you would do a a background check on your new tenant in a single family or any type of residential or multifamily, you're going to do a background check. You want to see, okay, are they paying their bills on time? What is their consistency with paying the bills? Because that's very important. Understanding the business model, what's going on with the business, those things are very key and important when you get into just this space in general. So let me answer the second question. How does this affect the lease terms? The lease terms are set in place. So once that's in the agreement, you don't cover whatever it says in that lease. You most likely going to have an outstanding balance. So okay, you need to come up with that money next month, or we're going to have to kick you out. The same way as if you're a tenant in residential or multifamily building, you you got to outstand the balance for a certain period of time. Evictions happen. Uh, Precious, does that answer your question fully? Cool. So Lee, I see you say you aren't really interested in modified gross leases, but could a modified gross lease be a good option for a certain type of business, maybe lower risk, or is the headache mostly the negotiation? So the modified gross lease is, I would say, and with me, it would it would have to be a solid business. Um, if I were to even go that route. And when I say a solid business, I'm talking about like it's not just your, it has a history. Like this business has been solid for the last 10, 15 years. And we get this information by looking at tax records because during the due diligence process, you're going to have to look at this business's previous history. And the best place that we could get that from is their tax records. Now, can you finagle numbers with taxes? Yes, but you can get a good sense of how this business is performing, going through the financial due diligence process. And that takes getting the tax returns, getting the profit and loss, the P&Ls, getting all of those financial records from this business is going to be important in making that judgment and whether you want to even get into the modified gross lease. Because once again, just like we're talking about, the negotiation, it doesn't have to be a headache. It's more so about, okay, what middle ground can we come to? Is this more than, as an investor, is this situation more than I'm willing to get into? Because we're that's part of the due diligence process too, is making sure you understand the lease, because this is a contract. This is a contract between you and this business for however long the term of this lease is. It could be for the next 2 years, it could be for the next 3 years, it could be for the next 5 years, 8 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever it is. You will be married to this tenant for the rest of the term of the lease. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a headache. I'm going to rest my statement on, it's mostly about what are you getting into this specific asset class for. And for me, I specifically focus on triple net because I want to be as hands off as I possibly can, because I don't want anything unforeseen. Now, granted, this is like nothing is promised. Tomorrow is not promised, nothing. But I invest in industrial, specifically triple net leases, because I like for the most part, set it and forget it situation. I want something that's predictable. Nothing's predictable when all of a sudden you come up and say, "Oh, we got this repair exceeds this amount or whatever the case may be. That's not predictable. So that's why I look for the triple net. When we get into the modified gross, typically what you're going to see is certain expenses are covered. Like think of it like a procedure that you get it at with your dentist or with your doctor. Your insurance covers a certain portion. After that, you have a copay or you have to cover the rest of that procedure. It's the same way. The tenant needs to get something done. There's an excess. Now I have to step in as the landlord and cover the rest. Does that answer your question, Lee? Hopefully it does. If not, okay, cool. Uh Precious, I'm gonna come back to you. I'm gonna come back to your question, and I'm gonna get into the into the triple net, the sub holy grail, as we could call it. So, ooh, I didn't turn my pen back on. So now we have your triple net. Woo! And you see more of these. Um, you're starting to see more of these because a lot of owners, they are kind of aging out of the game. And when I what I mean by aging out, I literally mean they're aging out of the game. Like a lot of because once again, industrial is it's simple. Does it come with its headaches? Absolutely. But when you have the triple net lease, I know this doesn't look like an industrial building, but that's okay. When you have the triple net lease, I now have less as an owner to pay for. I don't have to worry about the utilities. Guess what? It's covered by the tenant. I don't have to worry. I don't have to focus on the yeah, let me I'll get to that. I don't have to focus on the any maintenance. And after I really go through the structure of the triple net, I'm going to go into an example that I actually experienced, a property that I visited last year, was able to talk to the broker about all of those things. Another thing that we don't have to focus on, and this usually comes into play when you have multiple tenants in the same property. This thing is called CAM. CAM stands for Common Area Maintenance. So that could be like you have a common, you have like think about you go into an office building and you there's an area, there's a sitting area before anybody kind of disperses and goes forward. That's kind of like your common area. Everybody shares this space. Everybody's client can go through this space, and that's not every building, but everybody, whoever is in this building, their clients can come in this building. It's just shared space. I even believe parking lots can be considered, can go under the CAM umbrella because once again, this area is shared the by all the businesses or the business. So the tenant is covering this expense, the lighting, the everything. The you might have supplies that need to be updated or whatever the case may be. The wall, the chairs, desks, whatever in this common area, the tenant covers, and of course rent. I know I'm not writing rent. I feel like that would be redundant because that's what tenants are for. They pay rent. But as the owner, we pay only two things: taxes and insurance. Nothing in the We're not really negotiating anything. If we sign a new lease, the only thing that we may negotiate is the rent bumps, in which rent bumps are now they're in this is what makes this asset class uh such a predictable, if we may say, asset because it's in the contract that, hey, every single year you may see a rent, you're going to see a rent increase of 2.5%, 3%. Every 5 years, you're going to see a rent increase of 5%, 3%, whatever the case may be. It's built into the contract. So for the next 5 years, you're going to see a rent bump for 2.5%. Over the next 15 years, every 5 years, you're going to see a 5% rent bump. And that's what makes this asset class and the asset class a lot more. If you're looking for a set it and forget it situation, that's what makes this a lot more attractive. Is that specific piece because, and I mentioned that because that goes into the lease structure itself. These are negotiable things. With industrial, the contracts are negotiable. Typically, we're looking for properties that already have these businesses and lease structures in place. That's less negotiation that we have to do. We already done seen the contract. I like the contract. Okay. Uh, as and now I'm going to switch over to an example of the property that I saw probably like 30 minutes outside of Philadelphia, northwest of Philadelphia. Went out there, saw the property. It was a what is called a flex space, and the flex space is just like it's kind of think of it like an office building. It has multiple tenants. Usually, it's more like a ware. It kind of looks like a warehouse, and you you just have multiple tenants. Now, this one had five indoor tenants and one outdoor tenant. And what I mean by that is had five tenants that took up actual, space inside the building, and then the landscaping company was allowed to lease a space outside of the building, and we collect that owner was collecting rent from them renting that outside space. I think it was like $700 a month, something like that. It wasn't a lot, but it was also lower because they're in charge of landscaping. So if it snows, they handle the snow. If it was kind of like a quid pro quo situation. You're renting from me, and in return, you get a big reduction in the rent. I bring this up because this entire building had the triple net lease structure, and CAM was one of the things that was within the lease. Also, one of the properties that I visited, all of them have the same structure, but some of them had walls. And I said this in a previous webinar. When I discovered movable walls, that was a game changer for me because when you have your triple net lease or you have your modified gross lease, the tenant can pay the tenant can pay for those movable walls to be installed. And when they leave, those movable walls can come down very easily. It We're not tapping into the structure of the actual building. We're just putting up a wall and making it look nice so it's presentable and practical, applicable, feasible for the business to run their business out of this space. And this is what really attracted me to the industrial asset class was just seeing that, okay, so all I have to do is pay for taxes and insurance, only have to focus on two expenses. I love it. I don't have to think about utilities. Y'all can run up the water all y'all want. Y'all going to pay it regardless. I don't have to think about, once again, y'all need a different layout. Y'all can pay for that. You done damaged the walls because you done brought in new equipment. You can pay for that. Cam, you need new lighting. You can pay for that. All I'm focused on is taxes, insurance, and anything that affects this building structurally. So the roof, the HVAC, those are the biggest expenses. That's all I'm focused on when you're talking about a triple net lease, which that's why people look at this as being super duper attractive because especially if you look at a property, if you find a property in which that roof has been replaced within the last 5 years, the HVAC was recently replaced. Oh, you that's gold right there. All right, getting back to I saw some questions. May you explain ground leasing? What, or rather, how does this work in an industrial that is built that is building and has potential gross aspect? Seeing a few that are triple net, yet are new building, yet are new building industrial. So you're saying that they're building new industrial, uh, they're building a new industrial building and it has a ground lease on it? Is that what you're saying? Building and has potential gross aspect. What do you mean by the gross aspect? Are you talking about the modified gross? Their project gross. Okay, so they're developing a new building and they're the yeah, our new build. So so essentially the land in which it's on will be leased also, and the contract is triple net and it's a new building. Is that right? Or is it not built yet? And has ground leasing backed by corporate. Okay. I I haven't typically come across properties that have ground leases on them. So I would have to get back to you on that. Uh, Minnie, can you do me a favor and put that question into our bank of things to that we get to answer? So, Precious, I will get back to you on that regarding that specific situation. I've never come across that in this space, and probably because I don't focus on new development. I focus on things that are already in place, been there for a while. Uh, so, what reason would you have a cap on CAM? With rent bumps, can they also have capped and then increased when lease renewal comes up? Absolutely. You there's For the CAM, there's no cap because that's their space. They, as the tenant, they cover that, and the only thing that the only obligation to me as the landlord is, of course, to make sure that you are integritous about taking care of this space and also that you're paying the rent. That's that cam situation, the cam expenses, that's all on them. And then those rent bumps, the rent bump is they also cap. The rent bump is just like with your single family homes or your multifamily, the area is going to, at that time of signing that lease agreement, the market will dictate the rent bumps. How frequently, also, it could be dictated by where do we see this market in a few years. You can use that, which, I mean, we can say that's, I mean, I'm probably making up this term, but appreciated rent bumps. We're kind of like seeing into the future, but it's mainly what is what is the market really calling for right now? So if the market is calling for 2.5, then yes, we're going to work with 2.5 rent bump. If the market is calling for a 3% rent bump, we'll work with that. So once again, we're it's not like you're coming up with numbers out of thin air. you're coming up with realistic numbers that are market specific, because it also, and it has to be fair. Let me not say fair. It has to also be reasonable for the actual tenant themselves. So with this asset class, this isn't a situation because there's built-in rent bumps. We're not sitting here saying, "Oh, I because I'm the landlord, I have all the pool." When you go into it like that, you're going to lose tenants, and then when you may either lose tenants or you may have created a headache that could have completely been avoided. One, if you were knowledgeable of the market itself, and two, if you were reasonable in how you structured the lease. So having specific rent bumps, like in my opinion, a 2.5 rent bump is pretty nice. Not even pretty nice. That's really nice. I'm getting an additional 2.5% every single year. Absolutely. Why not? Especially when you think about it and you're doing like, I don't know, let's just say 2, 3 deals a year, like, and you're just racking that up. Why not? Why not go for the 2.5? So is there a cap? It's going to be market specific. I would have to say that. And once again, it's dependent on, I mean, you can talk to property managers. Um, you could do market research. You can go, if you have access to certain platforms and tools like CoStar, you can see those, like what what is going on in the market, so you can dictate once if they decide to renew their lease, what those rent bumps will be like. And sometimes you just keep the same lease in place. Like, it's kind of a situation where it's just like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You got the lease, you got the rent bumps in place, 3%. They've been good. They have a great history of paying their rent. Why not? The only time it'll really affect you is once they move out. But you'd hope that when you're getting in this space and you're operating the property, that you and your team are putting reserves to the side for the potential that they do move out. Because some people, they're not sitting there for a year. I mean, for forever. I mean, look at Rite Aid. All those people who owned the properties that Rite Aid was sitting in. Rite Aid went out of business, unfortunately. And if they were smart the entire time that they had these properties, they were putting reserves to the side so that way they could cover themselves until they get another tenant inside of there. So that goes once again back into location. It's going to be important for your location. Has to be a key location. That's why I always look for corridors as one of my main criteria, my top three criteria. Because if it's not there, it's going to be hard to get people in there. Did that answer your question, Precious? Cool. Glad that makes sense. Uh, and then I know we got like about 15 minutes left. The absolute net is essentially holy grail of the holy grail. Can't go wrong with it. Why can't you go wrong with it? Why? Because as the owner, all you're doing is collecting dollars. That's all you're doing. You're collecting the dollars while the tenant pays for insurance. So we're seeing this now in the real estate game, and I see it especially with multifamily because I work with quite a few buyers, helping them with multifamily. A lot of insurance is going up. I actually, maybe a couple months ago, I saw insurance going up drastically in this one location. And I'm talking about tripling. Not sure why, but it tripled. But we're seeing insurances go up. But guess what? I mean, yes, that may drive down the cash flow, but we don't have a bill to pay because the tenant, they're paying insurance, they're paying taxes, they're paying utilities, they're paying for that cam, they're paying landscaping, they're paying for everything. So, once again, the owner is just focused on collecting these little dollar signs. If I had that, I used to watch Family Guy, and uh, when I think about this, is where's my money, man? Where's my money? We don't want those situations, right? But that's essentially what we're doing. We're just collecting the rent at the end of the day. Okay. Lee, does the owner or tenant decide what type of insurance to get? That is, I mean, so that is going to be dependent on the situation. So in most cases, you're you in most cases, let me not say most, but in many cases, you have conventional loans going on with industrial properties. Of course, there's creative financing, but the area dictates what type of insurance. Now, if you need flood insurance because you chose to take on a building that's in a heavily flooded area, you you have to get the flood insurance. But when we're specifically talking about property insurance, that is the tenant must cover that. The tenant must, because they, so since the insurance is for the building and you own the building, you do have to get the insurance, but the tenant pays the insurance. If you get what I'm saying. And these, one thing that I did not mention, the the them paying for things is more like a reimbursement situation. So we're getting the bill, but they're covering the bill. We're getting that utility bill because I own the property. Like, think about it for you. If, let's just say, for example, it is you live in a building and the like a 5 unit building, and unfortunately for you, they have it where the landlord has it where the water is split equally amongst everybody. Well, that sucks because you may use less water. You got, your neighbor, that's a whole family. There's no way that me as a single person is using that much water. But hey, we're splitting it equally. When it comes to this, it doesn't even matter. You're you use as much water as you can use. You make sure you pay that at the end of the month, and now I'm sending you the bill, just like they would send. That's just like in that case, the landlord sends you the bill, and then you reimburse the landlord. So that's how those situations work when we're talking about these, um, like the tenant paying for insurance, taxes, CAM, things like that. Now, the utilities, they get those things in their name. Once again, you go back to our standard lease, you know, though, just like you, the electric gets put in your name, the gas gets put in your name, trash, sewage, all of those things, that stuff, or maybe not sewage, but it gets the heat, it gets put in your name. So, you know, please give me a two in the chat if all of this makes sense. If you have any more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. All right, I'm glad that makes sense. Um, yeah, so you know that's pretty much it. I'm going to stop sharing. Does any if you want to take a screenshot of this of the whiteboard, I will give you about 5 seconds to do so. You'll also get this recording. So if you miss out on the screenshot, you'll be sent the recording via email. So you can review this as many times as you want to. So I'm gonna give you all the 5 seconds now. Five, four, three, two, one. All right. So now I'm gonna stop sharing. Um, yes. You'll receive an email coming out of this. Because I know it's coming up on 12. Thank you so much for attending this. Thank you for so much for your participation. The emails coming your way this coming up week. You'll be able to sign up for our investor list and always be in the loop of new events coming up, any deals that we come across, any insight that you'd like to that we could offer on specific markets, newsletter, whatever the case may be. You sign up for that, that's what you're going to get. Is it free? Absolutely, because we love free. So yes, once again, thank you so much for taking this time out of your day to be with me for this 53 minutes. Enjoy the rest of y'all Saturday. Here in Philly is I think it's going up to 102. So uh, enjoy the weather as best as you can. I will see y'all later.